The Florida Historical Society presents Florida Frontiers is made possible in part by the Jessie Ball DuPont Fund and by
Florida's Space Coast Office of Tourism, representing destinations from Titusville to Cocoa Beach to Melbourne Beach. The Space Coast has a diverse 72 miles of beach, including surf towns and sea turtle nests. We have inspiring attractions, including the Kennedy Space Center, Brevard Museum of History and Natural Science, and the Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge. More information is available at www.visitspacecoast.com.
And by the Department of State Division of Cultural Affairs, the Florida Council of Arts and Culture, and the state of Florida. Welcome to Florida Frontiers, presented by the Florida Historical Society. I'm Ben Brotemarkle. St. Augustine, Florida was an active city for more than 4 decades before Jamestown, Virginia was established in 1607. The Spanish ruled Florida for 2 centuries before the British took control in 1763. The important role that Florida played in the American Revolution is often overlooked.
Most people are surprised to hear that Florida played any role in the American Revolution. It's such an Florida's history, I think, is so undersung in every chapter. And the American Revolution is one more surprise chapter in that history. People don't remember that Florida was wanted by everybody for so long. St. Augustine had to battle away the Georgians decade after decade. That wanted a piece of this. Thomas Jefferson wanted a piece of this. Everybody wanted a piece of this. And during the American Revolution, it stayed British. It remained who it was. It kept its character until the war actually ended. It wasn't lost in a battle that was fought in Florida. It was lost in a war that was fought up north and then traded as a colonial pawn back to Spain.
Really, the story of Florida and the American Revolution is an underappreciated story. Certainly, the story of Loyalists in the American Revolution is an underappreciated story. You know, most of our historians in American history are more interested in the winners. They're more interested in our forefathers, and they forget that those forefathers had brothers and sisters who were loyal to King George, who were not fighting for a new republic, and indeed, in many cases, were fighting against the formation of that republic.
Some of the most famous Revolutionary War historians will state that the last British entourage left what's now the United States from New York Harbor on November 23rd or 25th of 1783, when in fact Tonin and his entourage did not leave East Florida until November 13th of 1785. So our history here is just not given the full credit that it deserves.
The South is, anything below the Carolinas anyway, is often forgotten as well. So for Florida to have a little piece of this history, I think we should be very, very proud of that and promote that as much as possible.
The British controlled Florida from 1763 to 1783, encompassing the entire American Revolution. Florida remained loyal to England and King George III throughout the conflict. The British divided the area into West Florida, with its capital in Pensacola, and East Florida, with its capital in St. Augustine.
In East Florida, it was a different situation. In East Florida, they hadn't made basically a dime from 1763 to 1774. From 1774 on, the colony became prosperous because of the peace with the Seminoles. And once the colony became prosperous, on August 11, 1776, news of the Declaration of Independence reached St. Augustine, and a large crowd gathered in the plaza with effigies of Samuel Adams and John Hancock, and they hung them in trees and set them on fire. Because the attitude was like, okay, we haven't made any money for 11 years and you want us to do what? You know, so it was very much, it wasn't like the rest of the colonies where it was, estimated at a third loyal, a third patriot, and a third just leave me alone. In East Florida, it was every man adamantly loyal to king and country.
During the American Revolution, St. Augustine was kind of at the height of its transformation of the British period, from Spanish to British, which meant big things, more than just flags shifting and the sounds that were being spoken downtown. It was an expectation of Florida to become an industrial center, or not center, but industrial provider for a larger outside world. The Spanish had not necessarily expected that. So St. Augustine became, as well as St. John's, became an area of commerce and industry like it had never been before. So things were attached to St. Augustine in different ways. St. Augustine looked to the west, to the interior, in new ways. And it also looked out its inlet to the ocean in new ways that connected it to the British world.
The so-called 13 original colonies that would lead to the creation of the United States exclude the 14th and 15th colonies of East Florida and West Florida and ignore the British perspective.
But when you look at the war from a British perspective, even that is not where you draw the line. The British were concerned with 33 colonies. The British America stretched from Nova Scotia down to Grenada. So from Florida up, there were 17 colonies. From the Bahamas down, there were 16 British colonies. And during the course of the war, the British had actually two primary goals. Number one, don't lose a square inch of soil in the Caribbean to the Spanish or Dutch or French, because that's where the production of sugar ruled global economics. I mean, sugar was the equivalent then of what crude oil is today. So don't lose any soil and any sugar islands to the other European nations and empires. Primary goal number two is reclaim the American South, because by September of 1775, every southern colony, every colony south of the Chesapeake Bay, with the exception of East and West Florida, had fallen to the rebellion. And it was in the southern colonies that the flax for clothing and the foodstuffs that fed the slave population that produced the sugar, that's where it came from. So priority number one was maintain control of the Caribbean. Priority number two, reclaim the American South.
From the very start, the outbreak of hostilities, Florida was a haven for refugees, for Loyalists who were in parts of the colonies that were just getting too hot to handle. So from the very start, we had colonists from as far as New York coming down to Florida. And of course that really just, the floodgates opened as the war raged on, and as it became clear that there was indeed going to be a new republic, that kind of the unthinkable was happening, and that the greatest superpower on the face of the earth was going to lose against these rebels who wanted to start a new republic. And so lots and lots of refugees came into Florida.
On December 18, 1782, a fleet of 16 ships carrying British Loyalists left Charleston, South Carolina for the safe haven of St. Augustine, Florida. The fleet was lost just before making it to port. In 2009, the St. Augustine Lighthouse Archaeological Maritime Program, or LAMP, started searching for the Loyalist shipwrecks.
Like any science, we rely on predictive modeling. The ocean's a big place, and we don't have enough time or money to scan all of it for shipwrecks. So we go to documents, we go to historic maps, charts, two separate but similar things, and we get the voices of the past to tell us where to look. And then we go to science. We go to marine magnetometers, we use side-scan sonars and sub-bottom profilers to look at, in, and beneath the seas. We can find magnetic anomalies, we can find acoustic anomalies, and through a rigorous set of testing and excavations, ultimately find a wreck. Often it can take years to figure out the nature of that wreck, and with the case of storm wreck, it took a number of field seasons to conclusively say, this is Loyalist, this is the American Revolution. We knew we had something old, something 18th, maybe early 19th century, but to put a name on it and to put an identity to it took at least 4 or 5 years, 4 field seasons of field work, archaeology, conservation, and painstaking research.
It was as black as midnight down there. So the diver, I was the diver, I couldn't see a thing. And we knew that whatever wreckage might be there was buried. So we had a probe again, a low-tech tool. So this is just a 10-foot pipe attached to a fire hose, attached to a water hose, and we have a pump on the boat that is pumping out water at pretty high pressure. So you have this pipe that's jetting water out. And so you get the pipe situated vertically, and then you just sink it into the seafloor, and the weight of the pipe pushes it down, and that water just jets and cuts through the sand like a hot knife through butter. The very first probe that I laid at this site didn't hit anything. It just sank into the hilt. And so I was thinking, that's going to be one of those days. And we pulled up on this heavy probe, moved it over a meter, sunk it there, boom, clunked into something almost immediately, just maybe a foot beneath the sand. At that point, I used the probe to jet away some of the sand. Now, that's not the safest archaeological way to dig, but when we're testing to find out if this is a wreck or not, this is a great method, because very quickly I moved a little bit of the sand away, and I could feel with my hands, I couldn't see because it was so dark, but I could feel what was there, what I had hit. And I felt a wooden plank, I felt a stone, and I felt what was undoubtedly iron, an iron object. It was heavily encrusted, which is what iron does when it has been underwater for hundreds of years. And at that point, my heart was beating, racing, because with iron, with stone, with wood, a mile or so offshore, there's only one thing that can be, and that's a historic shipwreck.
A round cauldron was the first object that the LAMP team was able to excavate from the shipwreck. The discovery was made at the end of the summer excavation season, so the team would have to wait until 2010 to continue their underwater work.
When summer came again, we began excavating in earnest. And we, of course, laid out a grid, just like on any archaeological site, and using a dredge to excavate, to suck the sand up, we began to expose artifacts, and more artifacts, and more artifacts. And it quickly became apparent that this was a really significant find. We had a lot of material culture. After a season of digging by a kind of serendipitous discovery, we came out and the sand had moved in an area that we hadn't even been digging before, and there were 5 cannons and the ship's bell. And so this was the shipwreck that kind of kept on giving. We had a lot to work with. Over the next few years, as we found these objects and began to bring them up and to clean them off in the laboratory, and it's quite a long process, we began to narrow down the date range of our shipwreck. And so we found objects that were pretty clearly dated to the 1700s. So that was kind of our first, we know it's sometime in the 1700s. And then we found more things like this small flintlock pistol, gentleman's pistol, a box lock, and that dated to the second half of the 1700s. So these clues kept on pointing us in the right direction. I mentioned we found a ship's bell. Well, unfortunately, there was no date on it, no markings on it, but there was a date on one of the cannons that we brought up, a carronade, a small gun that was invented during the American Revolution. That date was 1780. So that's a perfect date for a ship that you hypothesize went down in 1782.
The discovery of objects from the Loyalist shipwreck is an exciting story, but it's just the beginning. Archaeologists spend years carefully conserving the artifacts in a laboratory. Archaeologists sometimes don't even know what they found until the encrustation is removed.
The process of bringing an artifact back to life is rarely a fast process. It takes the diligence and patience that often people assume archaeologists only have to have in the field. But that's just the beginning of the patience, because like I said, it's the 10th of what we do. So our conservation staff, who are really scientists that blend physical sciences, chemical sciences, electrical sciences all together, have to know how to treat an artifact that might have 15 different types of materials in it. Hard materials, metals, stone, soft materials, wood, leather, paper, textiles, and how to treat each component carefully so that the process for one does not disturb another. And generally speaking, that means taking something completely apart, dismantling a pistol, taking apart a lock, whatever it is for individual treatment. That process can take years. There is still archaeological conservation going on that started in the 1980s in places. And that means for institutions like ours and others that you not only have to commit to the story, but you have to commit to the resource. Because it's like baking. Once you start the process, you can't stop or put it into pause. You've got to commit all the way through. And so we are always reminding the public of that, reminding our patrons of that, and reminding each other of that, so that we will finish our commitment to these artifacts as good stewards of our shared history.
I had often wondered, now, what smoking gun would we find? What would we actually find that would definitively tell us we had a Loyalist ship? How can an archaeologist look back in time into someone's heart? How do we know if they were patriots or if they were Loyalists? I wasn't sure if that artifact existed, and yet it did. And we found it in the form of a small, tiny, tiny object, a pewter button that had the letters RP on it with a crown. And we knew that that was a Loyalist object. It is from a uniform, a British Army uniform of a provincial unit. And so these were Americans who were loyal to King George in the Royal Provincials. That was the first find. So not 100% definitive, but definitely good circumstantial evidence. Then we found the definitive evidence, another button that had the number 7 and 1 on it, and that was a number from the 71st Regiment. And that regiment was in Charleston and evacuated on December 18th, 1782, on the last fleet to leave Charleston. And so when we have that button, and since that time we found regimental buttons from the 63rd Regiment, the 30th Regiment, the New York Volunteers, or the 3rd American Regiment, all of those regiments were in Charleston on that fleet. And so all of that together on a shipwreck tells us this ship had to have been associated with that fleet. And so that's how we really know, even though we don't know the name of this vessel, and we may never know its name, we know it had to have been one of the ones that was on this fleet of refugees.
Less than 3 months after the wreck of the Loyalist fleet, the last naval battle of the American Revolution took place off of Florida's east coast on March 10, 1783. 2 American ships, the Alliance and the Duke de Lauzun, were on a mission to bring 72,000 Spanish silver dollars from Cuba to the American colonies to pay the Continental soldiers. The American ships were intercepted by 3 British ships, the Alarm, the Sybil, and the Tobago. An historic marker says that the battle took place off of Cape Canaveral. New research indicates that the battle took place farther south, somewhere between West Palm Beach and Boca Raton.
I think in my article I referred to it as a 2-ship treasure fleet that was on a secret mission to secure funding to pay the American soldiers that had been pretty much languishing for almost 2 years without pay in upstate New York and other places throughout the colonies.
Robert Morris of the Continental Congress was the mastermind of the secret plan to bring Spanish money from Cuba to fund the American Revolution. His plan would lead to the last naval battle of the war.
He was the chief financier for a lot of things to do with the military, and he was also what they called an agent of Marine, which is basically like the Secretary of the Navy now. And he was a self-made shipping mogul, so he had a lot of connections both in buying and selling ships, so he actually purchased the Duke de Lauzun himself, and he also had a lot of access to just in networking with people in other ports. So he was able to coordinate them going down to Havana to secure this money from a French financier.
As the American ships carrying the much-needed funds for the Continental Army met with the British ships determined to stop them, one ship from each side took the lead in battle. The HMS Sybil was under the command of James Vashon, and the USS Alliance was under the command of John Barry.
Basically, you had 2 ships sailing north, and you had 3 ships sailing south. The ships heading north were the Americans, and the 3 sailing south were the British. And only the Alliance and the Sybil really engaged. The other 2, the Tobago and the Alarm, kind of lingered back a little bit and didn't get involved in the fight. And the Duke de Lauzun just did its best to stay out of it because it couldn't keep up with any of them.
Vashon had received intelligence that the Duke de Lauzun was carrying money from Cuba. It was also the weaker of the 2 American ships.
The Sybil started to go after the Duke. The Duke was a smaller ship, by far a slower ship, and whether or not they had realized it, before they actually engaged with the Americans, the Duke had thrown off most of her cannons and ammunition to try to be faster, to lessen the load.
John Barry saw an opportunity to position the alliance between the Sybil and the Duc de Lauzun. The alliance attacked the Sybil until she retreated. The American mission was ultimately successful, but was a dangerous effort as the war was ending.
The only saving grace for them was the Spanish presence in the Caribbean. Other than that, from the day that Barry sailed out to meet John Greene in Havana, he was sailing through British territory with all those little islands, because that was all British controlled. And he makes several notes in his log throughout that trip before he got to Havana that said they were everywhere. And he actually engaged with a couple of them and very fortunately was able to escape a very dangerous altercation to get to Havana. So they were anticipating the British presence throughout.
While the American colonies couldn't afford to pay their soldiers, the economy of Loyalist East Florida flourished as they provided supplies to the British colonies in the Caribbean.
As the southern colonies fell, it kind of hit like a wave, starting with Virginia and just rolled down into the southern colonies. And as that happened, the loyalists of these colonies were funneled basically into East Florida and then trickle over to West Florida. So to kind of give you an idea, when the war broke out, population-wise, we only had, if you included Europeans and their slaves, we had about 3,500 people. At the end of the war, just right around Christmas of 1782, there were between 21 and 22,000 people here. So they literally funneled down and superpopulated East Florida. And what happened is that the British never got the southern colonies reclaimed as they were after, but so much of what they were looking for and needed so desperately in the Caribbean, we had here in East Florida the natural supplies for the foodstuffs and the flax and for naval stores and things like that. We picked up about 80% of the slack of what the southern colonies were no longer able to ship.
Ironically, the Treaty of Paris was signed more than a month before the last naval battle of the American Revolution occurred. No one in the Americas knew that the war was over because word had not yet arrived from Europe. That knowledge might not have made a difference in this mission, as America really needed the money from Cuba.
The Battle of Yorktown had already happened. Everything had stopped for the most part as far as the hostilities went, but they wouldn't disband the army, despite all the times that, in the many letters that George Washington had sent, they refused to disband it because they didn't actually believe that they were going to come to any terms. So for that 2-year window after Yorktown and then this battle, the soldiers were not paid, and they didn't have the money to pay them.
At the end of the American Revolution, control of Florida returned to the Spanish.
When the war was over, they were the only colony south of the Canadian border that never lowered the Union Jack. So they believed that they had earned their right to remain a British colony, just like Canada had. The problem was, at the end of the war, the Spanish came along and said, "Okay, we're sitting here at the Treaty of Paris. We want Gibraltar." And the British said, "Look, you tried twice during the conflict to take back Gibraltar. You lost both times. We're not going to just hand it to you. Matter of fact, if you want, we can go back to war over Gibraltar." I mean, that controlled, the flow of everything in and out of the Mediterranean. So the British, kind of being British, they said, "I'll tell you what we'll do. You captured West Florida, we're going to let you keep it, okay? And just because we're nice guys, we're going to throw in East Florida, so you can have back what you had all those years." And it absolutely sucker punched the Loyalists here in East Florida, because so many of them had sacrificed lives and families and their fortunes to come down here to maintain some kind of a base here, and now they're being handed back for political reasons. They found themselves nothing but pawns in the empire.
Immediately following the American Revolution, the British returned control of Florida to the Spanish. In 1821, Florida became a United States territory, and it was named a state in 1845. You've been watching Florida Frontiers, presented by the Florida Historical Society. Visit us anytime on the web at myfloridahistory.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ben Brotemarkle. The Florida Historical Society presents Florida Frontiers is made possible in part by the Jessie Ball DuPont Fund and by
Florida's Space Coast Office of Tourism, representing destinations from Titusville to Cocoa Beach to Melbourne Beach. The Space Coast has a diverse 72 miles of beach, including surf towns and sea turtle nests. We have inspiring attractions, including the Kennedy Space Center, Brevard Museum of History and Natural Science, and the Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge. More information is available at www.visitspacecoast.com.
and by the Department of State Division of Cultural Affairs, the Florida Council of Arts and Culture, and the state of Florida.